Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your
What is going on, beautiful people? Welcome to the 817 podcast, where we talk about trends, culture, business, economics, you name it, anything important about the lovely city of Fort Worth. I'm with my co-host, Jimmy Sweeney. What's up, man?
Not too much. How are you doing this week?
Doing good, right? We have this week is like I always feel really crazy in the Metroplex because it's like the holiday season and like people are coming to the airport, people are driving out of town, it's just like then you got shopping and Black Friday, and we haven't probably had a real one of those in a while. So I'm just trying to like not be here and or be in my house, one or the other. What do you got going on?
Yeah, I mean, last weekend we went down to San Antonio. And it took us 6 hours to get down to San Antonio. And that's not going down 35. Like, that's going where everybody says is the fast way. So if you are driving this week, prepare your sanity. Waco decided that it was a good idea to put all of their highways under construction at the same time. We know that Waco's not the brightest of places anyways, but that's a TCU fan talking. Yeah.
It's like really, the Texas growth, I really just feel it.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is just normal, and I stay in my house or don't do a lot, but it just feels like a lot of people lately.
Yeah. And next week will be the first time since we started the podcast that we are not putting up an episode on Monday.
Wow. Really?
We've done, even with like some of it being like in and out, we figured out how to record and have interviews every single week until next Monday. So we're enjoying the holiday week. We hope that you will as well, and have this to listen to for getting to your destination. Getting home, you're going to have to turn somebody else on.
Yeah. Dang, that's crazy. Now you're making me like, well, shoot, I'm about to have to rally, figure it out. Because I'll be out of town in L.A. I'm literally leaving Dallas-Fort Worth.
We are too. We'll be in Toronto.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah.
Nice. They don't celebrate Thanksgiving, or do they?
I don't think they have. Canadian Thanksgiving is in October. So yeah, we'll be up there just having fun, enjoying it's both my wife and I's birthdays this week. So we'll be celebrating birthdays and skipping on colonization a little bit.
Well, you know what? Let's talk about something we're thankful for, Jimmy, about Fort Worth. You know?
Yeah.
What are you thankful that this city has offered you maybe this last year or living here?
Yeah, I'm thankful for, like, specifically around this podcast. Like, we have a great group of young, excited journalists in the city right now, working across the board, whether it's KERA, the Star Telegram, Fort Worth Report, Fort Worth Magazine. Yeah. We just have a lot of people that are really passionate about what they're covering in the city right now. And that is a good thing for any community. And so that's definitely something not to take for granted that we have here right now. And it's something that has been really exciting to me over the last couple of years, especially.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's one of the biggest things we got to hold on to is our reporters. I just feel like it's always hard when someone new comes in. I think you can just tell the learning curve if you're a regular reader. So yeah, I think, keeping these amazing reporters excited, and invested in would be super important to the Metroplex as a whole.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the Fort Worth Way is going to feature especially in this episode, but I think that you're right. Like, the more we can keep our talented group of journalists here, and they get more and more integrated into Fort Worth culture, they're able to ask tough questions and push deeper and deeper and dig up stories that we might not have a pulse on otherwise. So definitely agree with you there. What about you? What are you thankful for?
Ooh. Oh, man. What am I thankful in Fort Worth? Well, I know this is like a typical cheesy one, but yeah, the listeners. I think if you're a regular listener, if you've come up to Jimmy or I and just said like, hey, appreciate the episode, or wrote an email, that's keeps us going. And I think it's just cool because this was just an idea. We're not connected to anyone or any association. We do this on our free time outside of our regular lives. And to see people, I think, reciprocate the love and like, hey, we're also busy, but we're trying to find time for this podcast. And I know how hard it is to get an hour of someone's time. So for you regular listeners, I really appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. It started from nothing, and it's been cool to see how it has started to grow a little bit. And so y'all that have been around from the beginning and y'all that are just jumping in now, we appreciate you listening, and it definitely means a lot to both of us. Yeah,
and if you feel in the giving spirit, this is 100% independent, no ads, nothing. While you're around having some turkey dinners here in Thanksgiving, go ahead and talk about us a little bit. Say, you know what? There's these crazy two guys that I listen to. Tell your cousins, tell your aunties, whoever you're talking to around the table about the 817 podcast.
Especially if you know they're going to hate it.
Yes, big facts. Big facts. All right, so let's go ahead and dive into the short stories today. We're going to first start out with the new city council meeting schedule, which changed this month. So the previous Fort Worth City Council meeting schedule was Tuesday. Work session started at 3 p.m., council meetings at 7 p.m., once a month, day meetings. We're at 8:30 a.m. and council meetings at 10 a.m. With a young city council, Mayor Maddie Parker and their initiative was how to, I guess, make it more flexible, not have longer days, and have more committed days to public commenting. The new Fort Worth City Council meeting schedule is first and third Tuesdays, work session at 1 p.m., public comment meetings at 6 p.m., second Tuesday agenda meeting, which includes zoning cases at 6 p.m., fourth Tuesday agenda meeting at 10 a.m. So far, it looks like it has been crickets at the meetings. But Jimmy, I know you brought this to our attention on something we should talk about.
Yeah, it's obviously you're not going to please everyone with every schedule, right? Like nothing's going to be one size fits all. The goal that was set forward was to try and make these meetings as accessible as possible. And so they took a model that is more similar to San Antonio, El Paso. So this wasn't just like made up out of thin air, but it has drawn some controversy. I will say some pros, and something that Mayor Maddie Parker talks about is that this makes city council a more accessible potential work environment, because like most of our council has young kids, and it just doesn't make sense to multiple times a month be keeping them out until 10 p.m., 11 p.m., whenever it would be for some of these meetings that would get pretty drawn out. So I do appreciate that they're looking at how do we make this a job that people with young families think that they could do, because ultimately more people feeling like they have access to this role elevates the standard for our city councilors and the caliber of people running. So I really do appreciate the accessibility to families. 6 p.m. was decided on, as 5:30 was originally suggested, but Jared Williams said, hey, like, people are getting off at 5, they're going through rush hour traffic, like, is 5:30 realistic? So they pushed it back to 6. So far it's been slow, though. The first week, 2 people showed up for public comment. The second one, 8 people showed up. Rough estimate was that about 7 were showing up to speak at each meeting. which isn't, it's just kind of going through the minutes from each meeting and hand counting. So it's not, take it for what you will. But I do think there is something to be said around removing public comment from the things that city council is talking about. And even though there is still opportunity to go in and comment on everything that's going on in the normal meetings, those are at a time that most working people aren't going to be able to make.
Yeah.
Having a dedicated time that is just public comment, though, makes it like you can come in, you can talk about literally anything.
Yeah.
But if that something earlier in the day has already been decided on and voted on, like there's just that disconnect from the actual substance of what city council is talking about and deciding on that feels I like adding a barrier, adding a step there that to me just feels a little bit removed. But like I said, obviously you're not going to be able to please everybody with a certain time. Bob Willoughby is heavily quoted in the Fort Worth Report article, which if you've ever been to, watched, or followed a city council meeting, you definitely know who Bob is. He is a very active citizen. He's there every time talking. And
maybe we get Bob on the show. I don't know if he has an email. How to find him.
Maybe we can try and find him. I'm sure he'd have plenty to say.
Yeah, for sure.
And I don't like, I understand the attitude of like city council sees him get up. I'm sure that some of them in their head and maybe outwardly roll their eyes a little bit. He has his mic cut pretty frequently. So I don't know. This is almost like a squeaky wheel does not get the grease because you've become a little too squeaky. But like that's somebody who I would think has a pretty good perspective on these meetings because he's there more than anybody else. Yeah. So I definitely do value his opinion on this. And he's against the time change, but at the same time, like he's older, doesn't have kids. Like I think that it's a good thing that they're trying to make these meetings fit the schedules of a younger crowd.
Yeah. Yeah. District 4 Councilmember Carrie Moon also clarified during the September 21 meeting that residents are still allowed to comment on specific agenda items during city council meetings, which they can do by filling out a speaker card in advance. The designated public comment meetings simply allow residents exclusive time to voice commentary about whatever topic concerns them. This is in the Fort Worth Report. I think it's interesting as well, though, the day switches and stuff like that, just like the time to prepare your comment and response. So if you want to position the language and prepare your comments for the people, that you can then have more time to do so as a city council and a politician, right? We got to remember they're politicians.
Yeah.
So it gives them more time to, we just got out of a meeting about this. Now we got to talk about it.
You're not getting blindsided by somebody. Yeah, for sure.
So I think that's advantage city council to be able to do that positioning. But let's go ahead and move into another story that it's about city council, and it's about just updates on redistricting and allowing public opinion in the redistricting choice.
Yeah, so this week, the city council voted 5-3 on their map that they are proposing to the redistricting task force. So there's about 18 maps from citizens that meet the criteria needed to be considered for our new city council districts. This week, city council also threw theirs into the ring, and the redistricting task force will narrow it down to like maybe about 5 that then go up for public comment. It's an interesting process. It's the first time it's worked this way. It is kind of like a fake independent redistricting task force, which is what we were hoping for. And some of the people on the task force commented on that and said, like, why are we here? City council gave us their map. If we're like, I'm sure that there's going to be some politics happening to make sure that map ends up in the top 5 maps that get discussed and voted on. And which one is city council going to vote on? Probably the one that they made themselves. So it really is like a faux independent task force because the job has kind of been done for them. But at the same time, it opens things up for public opinion. And so people will have the opportunity to speak out and look at these maps. The way that I saw the one that came out, I didn't have like any significant issues with it. It definitely does steer those 2 new districts towards North Fort Worth. But I think it does a better job of not splitting up people inside of 820 to marginalize their votes a little bit.
Yeah.
But I would be very interested to see what the public's maps come out as, because you can definitely see the influence on these of current city council members trying to protect themselves.
Yeah, yeah. And what's been a common like little phrase in all newspapers or articles read is more Fort Worthians live out of the loop, right? Than in the loop. So I think it's been a common new phrase and new data, which that's a whole different discussion if that's a good thing or bad thing. But after they review all the maps, the task force will meet December 2nd at 3 p.m. at City Hall to whittle the submissions down to around 5. This will make it easier for outside legal counsel to evaluate whether the maps violate the Voting Rights Act or the U.S. Constitution. The task force will have a public meeting at 6 p.m. December 8 in the City Council's chamber to get feedback from residents on the remaining map submissions. It will meet again 2 days later to select its initial map to present to City Council at its January 4th work session. The council will then hold a public meeting on January 11th and January 18th. So if you want to be involved in this, December 8th, January 11th, January 18th, this is where the council will discuss and vote on potential changes to the task force suggested maps. The process will conclude in February when the council is required to hold 4 public hearings around the city. It will vote on whether to accept the map at its February 2nd meeting at 10 a.m.
February 22nd meeting.
Yeah, February 22nd meeting at 10 a.m.
Yeah, so if it feels like we've been talking about redistricting for a long time, we have, and we still have 3 more months of this. So I would definitely encourage you to go to fortworthtexas.gov, like go through the process of finding out where these meetings are and look at the maps, make your voice heard, because this really will impact the next at least decade, probably couple decades of the city council in the city.
Something that's also been discussed for a long time is Aaron Dean's murder trial, and when will we actually get justice for Tatiana Jefferson's death? Judge David Hagerman has scheduled the trial for January 10th, and the jury selection process will start on January 4th, which is an important date because that's also when the council will share its draft of the new district map that they are presenting. So it's going to be a busy day in Fort Worth. So there's also discussions around a motion which will seek to transfer the trial outside of Tarrant County, which will need to be done by November 30th. And will be heard on the week of December 6th.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting discussion and one that Fort Worth Report did a good job kicking off their story with. March 1993, an all-white jury had issued its sentence for Christopher Broski, a teenage skinhead who was part of a drive-by shooting that killed Donald Thomas, a black man. Broski had received only probation for his role in the murder of Thomas, who sat on his truck's flatbed surrounded by friends in Arlington when he was shot. The marches changed history. New charges were filed against Broski, and the trial was moved to Galveston, where a jury gave him 40 years in prison. More than 27 years later, we're looking at a situation that could unfold in a similar way. We're obviously not legal professionals or legal experts, but a trial in Tarrant County, like, this has been a major part of the news for 2 years now, 2+ years. Everybody's going to come in with a preconceived notion, and there's a lot to unpack in that. And so there is obviously a benefit to moving it to a place where there is less personal tie to the issue, and hopefully see justice come from that. So it will be interesting to see if that motion is heard at all. I don't really know exactly what the process looks like for that. But that's something that appears to be on the table.
Yeah, I mean, how are you going to find an unbiased jury in Tarrant County?
Yeah, like somebody's connected to the police department, somebody's connected to her neighborhood. Like, I feel like the speed with which people will get struck from the jury is very quick. So I'd agree. And maybe that's a process that has to start to get the trial moved. But also, if the trial gets moved, does that mean it gets pushed back? Like, are we going way down the docket now in another county? Is it better to make it happen here? Those are the questions that we're coming into this trying to figure out.
Yeah. Very good points.
But that kind of leads us into talking about the Fort Worth way. And that's something that was brought up in the same article from November 16th, Lip Service or Solutions in Fort Worth, as Aaron Dean gets a new trial date. Civic leaders drive dialogue on race and police. If you've been in Fort Worth a long time, even if you haven't been in Fort Worth a long time, you've probably heard somebody say something about the Fort Worth way, and it's this general way of life of being nice to each other, but doing so in the name of maintaining the status quo. It can mean being how Fort Worth can be welcoming, or it can mean being excluded from important discussions among those who have power. And that comes up in the conversation about the city council decided to completely ignore all the recommendations from an independent task force on race, and has only pseudo maybe kind of tried to maneuver its way around those in ways that are really just beneficial to maintaining current power structures. And that gets called out by the Estella Williams, president of the NAACP Tarrant County branch, that we're not having the necessary conversations about race. The NAACP feels like they've been left out of these conversations, and it's easy to see from the outside who is sitting at what tables and know what conversations are being had about race, or if we just want to expand that into Fort Worth culture as a whole. And that kind of came a little bit to the forefront this week with Jonathan Morris, who has his TV show on Magnolia Network, has recently opened Hotel Dryce and Fort Worth Barbershop. Got an email from his bar manager because of a set of people who are well known in Fort Worth, are very wealthy, have a lot of power, and are pretty well known to just be mean people, rude people to the average Fort Worthian around town. But they never really get called out for it because, I mean, the name of American culture is protect the elites in hopes that one day you might get a scrap thrown by them to you. So this was the city manager, David Cook, the head of the stock show and rodeo, Steve Murrin, Sasha Bass, and a group of people who really came into Hotel Dryce and were just rude. Sasha Bass, if you have seen her around town ever, she tends to carry around her little dog in her bag with her. Dogs aren't allowed in the hotel lobby. The bar manager very kindly asked that she walk out. She leave the dog outside, take the dog outside. They all kind of laughed at her. Were, disrespectful as she continued to try and push this. After people had closed out their tabs and she had called last call, they came and were insisting that she pour them more drinks, even though it was closing time. Kind of threw around this, do you know who I am type of mentality. And I don't know. I mean, just reading that, it's like, even though we know this behavior happens, it's something that we've said a lot recently, that we just want to have higher standards for our public figures. And I mean, especially for like the Basses, private citizens, like they have a ton of money, feel like Fort Worth is kind of like a playground for them to get tax rebates. But David Cook, you are like the best paid city employee. Like, you work for all of us. And if you're willing to be this disrespectful to a service industry person to their face, how are you acting and making decisions about the average Fort Worthian behind closed doors? And that's one thing that was really concerning to me about this is, like, we want Fort Worth and city council to be open to everybody to come in, have their opinion heard, feel like they are a part of this. And ultimately, like, the people behind the curtains still don't really care about what the average Fort Worth person wants or needs. Like, they're still working for the elites. And I'm not saying that to generalize, like, everybody that works for Fort Worth, the city of Fort Worth, does this, because there are a lot of really great people working very hard for this city and doing a lot of great things for the city. But when you see your highest ranking city employee walking around town flaunting this, do you know who I am? Look who I'm with. Like, that's just not an acceptable behavior at all.
Yeah. Some things to note that, doing a little research here. You may have known this, but I did not. That Sasha Bass is like our age.
Yeah.
Like, she's like, she's a Latina who, is 40 years younger than Ed. And, so, I just think that's also interesting. And I just think it's interesting that you go into a black-owned hotel, and almost in a Boolean sense, like, that to me is like what's really offensive about it is that, if you're about being inclusive and, a black man builds a hotel in your neighborhood that's oftentimes people say is not welcoming, you should do everything in your best behavior to, like, celebrate and be the nicest you can be in that hotel.
Yeah, I also want to know what they tipped.
Yeah.
I'm sure it wasn't what they should be. But I agree. Like, the Fort Worth way has been marked by people being left out of the conversation and not feeling like they have their voices heard. And this just feels like a public reflection of that. And I don't know. I mean, Jonathan might take some shit for sharing this story, but like, we need to continue sharing these things so that people can't get away with this behavior. This isn't even like a class thing. This is just how you should treat another human being. Like, you're not better than somebody because you were born into billions of dollars. Like, we're all human beings, and we should be treating each other that way. And it doesn't matter who you are.
Yeah. Yeah, and let's be clear, like, in my opinion, who you are, you're one, born into wealth, cool, and one, you were married into wealth, cool.
You won the lottery, essentially.
Yippee-ki-yay.
Yeah.
You haven't done anything that magnificent. Like, that is an easy journey, people. That is an easy journey. So, yeah, like, that's who you are. You want to say, do you know who you are? That's who you are. You married into wealth, you born into wealth. Cool.
Yeah, like
but that's Fort Worth as a whole.
Oh yeah,
I mean, I think the challenge with, I mean, that's America. I mean, we're talking about America as a whole. Like, something that always reminds me of how the system wasn't consciously built for inclusivity and for others is that our country was built where the only people can vote are white men with land. And so something that I've been working on is realizing and moving my bias around when I see a white person. I can't, as a person of color, can't assume or say, oh, they're from wealth or generational wealth, because there are tons of white families and blue collar families that this country wasn't made for them. But the difference is the white elites had make them believe that it is made for them. And so we glorify this kind of behavior and we obsess getting into the room where it happens. Now, I just use that because I went to Hamilton and Dallas this last weekend. I told my wife, it's like, I don't think we should want to be where it happens, because the room where it happens means, yes, they have the power, but oftentimes where it happens, they don't know what's actually happening, like what's actually popping, what's actually the magic. They're so far removed from actual society that who cares what the room is doing, because they don't know. They're making decisions for 65-year-olds and who run the city rather than the average Fort Worthian who's actually 34. And Jonathan Morris is making a modern hotel for the modern Fort Worthian. And so this kind of behavior is unacceptable. It is, you can keep that at the stockyards. You don't need to go into a black man's hotel and let them know that you are more important than them, at least in your eyes, because that's not how the rest of us see it. I love all the people in the city of Fort Worth who are trying to make a difference. And when we get intense and when we criticize or share our perspective, it's not that we don't love you. It's not that we don't see you out there trying to make it work. It is just that sometimes we just don't understand. And even when we try, it doesn't work. And so to me, this modern Westing and calling Fort Worth the modern West, what it sounds like to someone on the east side is that Cowtown sounds like I might be a cowboy and racist, where the modern West sounds like I might be elite and racist. It doesn't ring inclusivity, even though I do believe that was the effort put at will. So the Fort Worth way may be becoming less cowboy, but I don't think it's becoming more inclusive.
Yeah, and like, if we want to broaden this to like Texas politics and U.S. politics, like a lot of the decisions that are being made in these special sessions that Abbott has kept calling are only supported by like 20% of Texans. Like, that's Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah.
Like, the majority of Republicans don't even want a lot of this garbage. But the room where it happens, like, that's the behind closed doors. That's where these decisions are being made. And it's like everybody in the party needs to fall in line and make these things happen. Yeah. Even when we're talking like bipartisan infrastructure bill, Build Back Better, like Sinema and Manchin are holding these things back, but like their constituents support it. Yeah. It's not about representing their communities. It's about getting a paycheck and like continuing to accumulate wealth and power for them. And so by holding out, changing their minds, going back and forth, like they just continue to get this funding from both sides and from large corporations, especially oil companies. And so it is like decisions being made at the Texas state level, and then even seeing nationally, are not reflective of what the entire country wants. It's reflective of padding the pockets of a few people. Yeah, like to echo that, I really commend Jonathan for posting this. And like, even if it was something that was done out of like frustration or just like being angry about it, like this is a small, not even a small, this is a step towards like being able to democratize power and actually like get people involved and feeling like they have a voice. Him feeling comfortable and secure in posting this and talking about this says a lot about where Fort Worth could go if we don't want to continue this Fort Worth way that rules people out. Yeah. Thanks for listening to our rant on that. But I feel like it, in a week that was maybe a little bit slower in big stories, it kind of came to the forefront and showed up a few times of what's the Fort Worth way and like why do we let it continue to be that way and how do we change it? Yeah. Yeah, you ready to move into wins and losses?
Let's do it.
My loss, another thing that we have talked about forever and will continue talking about forever, is the Panther Island project. So Tarrant County Water District plans to spend a few more $1 million on it. Right now they're spending $3 million to buy an area of land that will be needed for creating the floodplain and rerouting the river. Tuesday's actions follow 65 other land acquisitions made, totaling $93 million. And there's another 18 acquisitions that will need to be made for the project, of which we still have no idea when federal funding will come, if it ever will. Like, what's the significance of this? Like, you're displacing businesses, you're giving them 90 days to move out with who knows what kind of relocation assistance. And it's just kind of like, to me, a bad look that we continue doing these things with the prayer that one day we might get federal funding for this. It's just like we're flushing money down the toilet, it seems like, which I guess is the name of the game of the water district over the last decade plus. But I just hate that businesses are having to be displaced with no purpose or end in sight for when anything would actually be done with their land or with this project ever really moving forward.
Yeah. That's, to me, a loss in the sense of like Fort Worth retail as a whole is just really bad. I mean, it is. I mean, I even went to Clear Fork the other weekend and brought some like friends, and we like went there, and there's no like 80% of those shops. I'm like, what do you like? Why would I ever buy something here? I gotta have like different kind of like like I'm not like I just like there's a Neiman Marcus which is cool. There's a Louis Vuitton which is cool. Like there's a couple like luxury things where you can go shopping, but there's a lot of stuff that's like, is this really a clothes store? Is this really a store? Like it just seems like misplaced, and we got through it in like 10 minutes. You know, like all right, well I guess we go back to Southside and West Magnolia, and so my loss is Fort Worth retail, businesses as a whole, and you see even like H&M, the big conglomerate downtown, is closing, which I think is a good thing because it doesn't really fit in downtown. But Fort Worth is just really struggling retail wise. I mean, me and my wife, we went to Hamilton this weekend, and we shopped at North Park because we're like, oh, we're by some shopping. We got to go to North Park, and she, bought some clothes.
Yeah, I mean, Fort Worth retail has always really struggled, you know, like, and even as retail locations try and come together locations wise, like Clear Fork, like we just continue reimagining different versions of malls, which they work. Like people don't want to drive here for something. They want to go to one location, get a number of things. It feels like a lot of retail and just unique businesses in general struggle to get a foot in Fort Worth, and maybe part of that is because of the spread out nature of the city. Our population is kind of bloated versus who actually like spends money inside the city, and so we almost have this false perception of how big Fort Worth really is, like Fort Worth really is. Yeah, I mean, there are a number of stores that I've really appreciated that even pre-pandemic closed down just because they couldn't find a market that would be very easy for them to find in other big cities.
I even think that another thing that a loss like goes on with this is I don't know if it's a loss like because I wasn't there, but we had our first real hip hop show in Fort Worth in a long time. I mean, Benny the Butcher, he had an album that was nominated for Best Album when it came out. He performed at Wild Acre Live. Lou Charles was before it. I couldn't make it out there, but I really wanted to because I was like, man, we finally got like a real rapper come to Fort Worth rather than go to Trees and Deep Ellum. And I don't think anyone really showed out. I don't know, but based off of how like the Instagrams and like the views in there, it wasn't what I would feel like if I was a main star. Like probably next time I'm just going to go to Dallas.
Yeah.
So I feel like that hit so many parts of Fort Worth. So wins.
Yeah, my win. Let's talk about Texas Wesleyan. They are moving forward on a football stadium project. They plan to build a new $16.5 million football stadium with a $5 million gift from one of their trustees that'll move them out of Farrington Field and into their own facility located a block north of East Rosedale between Binkley and Nashville. There's a lot that goes into, like, I don't necessarily think that just building sports stadiums is always a win. But I really appreciate development in East Fort Worth, and am always going to lean positively towards that. And I mean, okay, a lot of you probably haven't been over to the field that the Vaqueros and Wesleyan soccer play at. But like the field's on a slant, the turf is so crappy, like there's not even real like solid bathroom facilities. Like this, I think, has large implications beyond just Texas Wesleyan, and I mean hopefully trickles into funding for other sports there, because I do know that like sports funding is not equitable. College sports funding and professional sports funding is not equitable across minor sports. So I do hope that this trickles into smaller sports there. But just the investment by the school into the city and other areas of Rosedale. I really appreciate. I would appreciate, what kind of partnership can we form with Austin Bold FC? Like, instead of going up, building a new stadium in Keller, like, let's keep this in the city, especially in a part of Fort Worth that really values and cares about soccer.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of possibilities for what this could be used for. And overall, I would say that it's a win to have this investment coming for them.
Yeah. I just had a random thought while you were talking around the football, like the stadium is it was Texas Wesleyan Law College before Texas A&M Law.
Yeah, A&M bought it from Texas Wesleyan.
I wonder if A&M Fort Worth, an acquisition of the whole thing one day, how it's all growing. I mean, and now you're adding football, like you're really doubling down there. It's kind of like if this was a business, it's like you're trying to look good for a merger and acquisition one day. And, a merger and acquisition for a company is like, right, football culture.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. You look at A&M Fort Worth, UT Arlington. I mean, it's been done before. So it's, again, just that's something that clicked, when.
Yeah, I hadn't put that together, but that is an interesting thought. If A&M's putting this much money into Fort Worth, would they keep? Yeah. Is this a potential even further growth opportunity for them? That is really interesting.
Sometimes I say some stuff that's good, Jimmy. Sometimes others I ramble. But hey, we're here today and we show up.
That's what we're here for.
I think we're good. Oh, no, I have a win, right? So what's my win? Do I have a win? Oh, yeah. My win is Kimball Art Museum was ranked by Yelp as the top museum in the state of Texas.
Yeah.
So I think that's super cool. The Kimball Art Museum is super awesome. I really enjoy it when we have people in town. I love taking them there. So just kudos. Did you see Fort Worth on top of lists these days in Texas, right? We got barbecue, right? We got museums. We're doing it, people. And so it's just my win that, Fort Worth is a great place to live. We have culture, but the Fort Worth way limits inclusivity. That's why we have this pod to kind of have balanced sides and talk about things like this that, I know there's a lot of people who be like, they know a lot more than us, right? I just found out that Sasha Bass was our age and a Latina. And so I can't hate on her too much because, hey, you got to do your thing. But it's just like the people who do know a lot, they won't get on a mic and say it. So
Thanks everyone for listening. We hope you enjoy your Thanksgiving. Be safe driving out there, getting wherever you're going. Be safe on Black Friday. Support local businesses. Go and spend your dollars, spend your Christmas money at some local places, and help them keep going. We won't see you next week, but we'll be back the week after.
Later. Have a good holidays.
Double tap. Now they control your life. Dopamine swipe. Follow us like double tap. Now they control your life.